Hey everyone, welcome to Pop Culture Pastor, where we look at movies, music, comics, and more from the perspective of faith.
Welcome to the show, everyone. This is your self-proclaimed pop culture pastor, Chris Perrey. Today, we're asking this question of why do we feel compelled to share what we love, whether that is Jesus or something like a K-pop band. We're talking about the idea of pop culture evangelism. And good news today is that we have two special guests. So our first guest is Anna Jane Perrey, also known as Mrs. Pop Culture Pastor. Welcome back to the show, Anna Jane.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Anna Jane was on our Song of Songs episode, which I think is the most downloaded because it's the one that's about sex. So obviously that's what people are gonna check out. So good to have you back. And then our new guest today is Roni Zimmerman. Welcome to Pop Culture Pastor, Roni.
Thank you very much.
Ronnie and Anna Jane and I went to school together. Actually, I don't know if we overlapped at all, but we went to the same school
Oh,
at
yeah.
different points.
I didn't really know you, Chris.
Yeah, well, I was not as popular as my wife. Um, but we've lived in other places together and share a lot of common interests that we're going to be talking about today. But the way that I usually start with our guests is to ask about some of your first pop culture interests. So, Ronnie, what were some of the things that you remember being into first?
Well, I was going to mention a childhood obsession I had, which is that I had 9 Cabbage Patch Kids. But there's not much to say about that. And I thought it'd be better to go the junior high route, in which was a time I was super obsessed with like hair bands. So anything that was like Poison, Warrant, Def Leppard, Queensryche. Do you guys remember Queensryche?
I know of them.
I definitely went to a Queensryche concert in 8th grade. And we would buy like the magazines. Anna Jane, you told me you bought Bop and Bopper. I would
Don't you know
buy,
it?
they had versions of those magazines for hair bands. So we would buy those and like cut out the little tiny pictures even and like put them on the wall. Very
Cute.
deeply uncool.
Hmm. All of the early interests were in eighth grade. I went to see Hootie and the Blowfish, so I think that's a little more lame. I still have the hat from then, and I was cutting out X-Men comic books and putting those on my wall.
And that's
That's what
still
I did.
happening today.
Basically, yes. All right, well, getting into today's topic, we're talking about the idea of evangelism, the idea of telling the good news. So, evangelism in English comes from the Greek word euangelion, which just translates as good news, gospel. It all means the same thing. But and we think of that as a spiritual term, but good news can mean a lot of things. So, for either of you, like when you hear someone say, "I've got good news," what kind of reactions do you have to hearing that?
I always feel like it has nothing to do with evangelizing and has to do with like personal success. If someone were to say that, I wouldn't be like, oh, you're going to present me with a life-changing opportunity. I'd feel like they were like, I got a promotion or something like that.
Okay.
I mean, it really kind of depends on what follows the I've got good news. If it's I've got good news, I found an essential oil for your rosacea, then maybe I'm not going to be as into that good news as I've got good news, I got a promotion. Or I've got good news, I ate a chocolate cake. I
I
don't
don't,
Or
know.
you made a
I made
chocolate
a
cake.
chocolate
See,
cake and
that's
then I
good.
ate
That's
it.
real good
Yeah.
news. Because that's a good news that you can share,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's true evangelism. Um,
chocolate cake.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it depends on the situation. If you are in a hospital and you hear, "I've got good news," like that's that's a big deal. But yeah, if it's someone that has a multi-level marketing scheme, yeah, I'm not as excited about your good news as you might be, and it's probably not that good. And so, like I said, we think of good news as, this biblical term, right? That's what gospel is. And yet, even just the Greek word existed before Jesus was around. And so it was, even in his day, it was the thing that people were talking about, the good news of the Roman Empire. And so, depending on the circumstances, it can mean a lot of different things. And, obviously, spiritual writers have talked a lot about what good news is or what it means. N.T. Wright has a good book on it. And three aspects of good news that he mentions is that it addresses a situation we already know about. So, right, you have some health issue, a doctor tells you have good news, that's addressing that problem. Or you hate your current job and you had an interview and then they say, hey, I've got good news. Well, it's probably going to change that. So, good news, second aspect, means something has happened that's going to change everything. And yet, a third aspect of good news is that it's usually not, a lot of times it's not something that's happened yet, right? That's why you're telling about it or you're hearing about it. And so when you hear about it, it's creating this period of hopeful waiting. It's like, okay, I can enjoy this thing if it is something that I want to enjoy, or soon I'll start this new job or get this new medication. And so you're still kind of waiting for it, but even in that space, you know that things are going to change. So obviously, you think about good news, it seems like it should always be good. And yet, just, I don't know, what are your reactions to the word evangelism itself? Is that like something you get excited about? Anna Jane's making a face. This is a
She is,
podcast, so you
yeah.
gotta verbalize that
I,
face.
It's a grimace.
man,
Yeah, grimace. There you go.
I'm so torn with the word because, like, I love Jesus and I want people to know, like, that hope and whatever, but also, like, I just associate the word evangelism with pushy
Mm,
and not listening, and maybe even kind of aggressive at times. Like, when I think of evangelists that I've known in the past, there's been some really great ones, but then there's been a lot that just have just almost like shoved it at me
mm,
or and at other people and caused a lot of damage. And so I tend to have a more negative reaction to the word evangelism, but it's like a wistful negative reaction.
mm.
Like, I don't like it a whole bunch, but I wish I did because of what it's actually supposed to be, which is bringing good news to people.
Well, along those lines, like, what would you say are some of the worst evangelistic Christian practices? Have you ever been on the receiving end of any of those, Ronnie?
I've always thought that all mission trips are super weird. Like they're 100% just for the fun of the person going and not to help any brown people that you encounter, which seems to be usually the situation involved. It
Yeah,
always has felt very like white colonist
yeah,
kind of
white
thing.
saviors. The kind of missions as tourism. Where it's like, we're gonna spend thousands of dollars to fly to this other country and then shoddily build something that someone there could build much better and easier. Yeah, a
I
lot of
mean,
people have seen problems with that.
maybe not totally like shoddily built. Like, I think
Anna Jane has to defend her construction skills.
Hey, I've done it, so I mean, I'm talking about myself here.
well, it's just, I mean, I do think that the heart is in the
Hmm.
right place.
I agree
It's
with
like
that.
you recognize I have a lot, and I can give to maybe people who don't have the same things that I do, but I think that that's misplaced.
Mm,
I think it is colonialism, Ronnie, like you said, like we know what's best and what works best.
hmm.
So we're going to come and tell that to you, and we're going to come do this thing for you. But then we're going to leave you after a week and, like, good luck. And so that's why there's a lot of like nonprofits that are very successful working in Africa or Mexico or some of these like really popular mission trip
Hmm.
places. And more often than not, they're the ones that work hand in hand with the local leaders
Yeah, if it has
there.
local leadership, that's
Yeah.
very different than just
Yeah,
about people coming
a
in.
mission trip is a lot different than a nonprofit in its nature as
That's
well,
true.
because a
Yeah.
That's
mission
true.
trip is saying you need our help
Mm,
and we're better than you, sort of. But
Hmm.
also it's very much for the Instagram and
mm,
or the
mm.
tales of seeing, what do they call it? Poverty porn, where you can
Hmm.
like take pictures with kids with bare feet and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, this is a little off topic, but I think the only upside to that is sometimes it does open the eyes of very sheltered American white kids to see, oh, people actually have a very different experience, and there's good there. But if you're selling it as this mission, we're going to evangelize in these ways, well, sometimes you just need to be a little more aware of what's going on. All right, any other examples you thought of for bad evangelistic practices, either like harmful or just annoying?
Well, I think a lot about, I don't know, revivals and things like that. Like just, I don't know, getting people in the water. Like you get them in the water, get
The
them
big, yeah, it's all
baptized.
pushing towards the altar call,
Yeah, put those
and they
number,
move
get those
on.
numbers for how many people accepted
Hmm.
the Jesus into their hearts or how many people were baptized, and sometimes it just feels so much like a numbers game and less like a I'm invested in their souls
Yeah, there's
kind
no
of game.
relationships that are coming out of
Yeah.
this. It's just, yeah, we did this thing.
Have you ever gone to a restaurant and had someone sit down at your booth with the purpose of evangelizing you? Because I have.
Yeah,
It does
No.
not work.
yeah, I think there's so many evangelistic practices. It's like this is just going to turn someone away more. I mean, the one I thought of is like when you find the fake dollar bill on the ground, and you're excited, right? Like, ooh, $5, and you pick it up and you open it, and it's actually a little tract of like, hey, you're gonna go to hell. Like, oh wow, now I just found out, A, I didn't get this $5 that I wanted, and now I'm actually being threatened.
Is that
So
real life?
you've never gotten one of those fake dollar
No.
things? Oh
Honestly, if I
man.
picked one up and it literally said on it, you're going to go to hell, I would love it. I would keep it and I would put it on my wall.
Yeah. I mean, they
I
may
mean,
not be that blunt about it, but it is like, hey, this isn't money, but we have something better for you.
we have some
Like,
fire insurance for
yeah,
you.
it's like, no, I just wanted money right now, and now I'm just angry, so I'm definitely not receptive to your message.
I mean, at least have it be a real dollar bill,
Yeah,
you know,
hey,
with a sticky note on it or something.
yeah, if you're doing like that, actually could work. I
Yeah.
don't know. It's gonna work better than like faking someone out, thinking
Then
they're getting
Ronnie would
money.
have a dollar and a sign saying that she was going to hell to put up on her bulletin board.
I recently saw in China that they have these like restaurant flyers that fold up and they look like Louis Vuitton wallets that you leave on the ground, which is the same idea. So then you pick it up and it's a coupon to a restaurant.
That's a little more useful than some of these tracks, I would
I
say.
would go to that.
Yeah. So, some of it is just like the way that the message is presented in these evangelistic spaces or practices, where it's like you're saying it's good news, but it's really bad news, right? Like you're starting with this, you're going to burn or you're going to hell. But good news, I have a way out. It's like, well, I didn't, this is a problem that you've created here for me. And so I was actually fine until you told me about it. The idea that you have to have bad news for it to be good, like I mentioned, if it's really good news, you already kind of know something that's not right, and this is speaking to it. And so I think with the gospel, it can already just speak to what people are dealing with. You don't have to bring in all this other bad stuff on top of it. All right, so we're not just thinking about, evangelism, telling people about Jesus. Today we're thinking about sort of evangelism that happens with pop culture, where there's the similar tendency. You want to talk about, you want to share things that you care about, that you love. You want to get other people into it, and yet even with pop culture, sometimes that's not as enjoyable of an experience as we might want. So, what are some of the worst, like pop culture evangelistic practices?
Okay, I think that this is going to come up anyway, but when you have someone that's always giving you recommendations and you think that person is the stupidest person in the world anyway. And so then what I do, because I used to have someone when I worked at this job a while ago that would always give me recommendations. and I would file it into a different category in my mind, which was never watch that. Because in my mind, if this stupid person likes that, then I don't need to put any time in it at all.
It's an anti-recommendation,
Yeah, yeah. It's like,
anti-evangelism.
exactly.
One of my most, like, I don't know, cringy feelings is when someone's like, let's watch this comedian on Netflix. You'll think he's so funny, or you'll think she's so funny. And then we watch it together. And as a people pleaser, I'm like, I feel like I need to laugh, but I really want to claw my eyeballs out right now because this is not funny to me. And I never know what to do in those situations. I mean, honestly, I laugh and like never watch it again.
Yep.
But
But it
I
teaches
hate
you
that.
something about that person too. It opens a
Yeah.
little window, and you think
Yes.
they're dumber than you did before.
I poorly evangelized to Chris once, pop culturally,
Only once.
only once, sir, about the musical Hamilton.
Uh-oh.
Because I was into it before he was, and I deep dived into it. In fact, there's three things that I've been obsessed with in my life, like truly deeply obsessed with: The Sandlot when I was 13, Hamilton the musical when it came out,
Hmm.
and now BTS, which we will be talking about later.
Hmm.
But I kept on sending Chris clips or be like, oh, Chris, you need to listen to this song. I think you would really like it. I was doing all the things that I hated, but I could not help it because I wanted him to love it so much because I loved it so much. Side note, he ended up loving it, but he had to do it on his time. Like he would secretly listen to it and not tell me because he didn't want to get my hopes up. But I did all the things I hated trying to get him to like Hamilton.
Yeah, it was a lot. She, as we will hear in a little bit, sometimes Anna Jane has no chill.
How dare you?
Yeah,
I mean, that's not even debatable.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, definitely here, you watch this and I'm going to watch you watch it so I can
Oh,
make sure that you're having the
Ooh.
experience that I have. It's like,
that's rough.
please don't. Like, send it to me and I'll watch it at my own time. And,
Mhm.
maybe I will. But, like, don't make me enjoy it with you.
Or have
I'm
you had
have,
someone suggest something so many times, and then you decide one day, like, okay, I'm going to sit down on my own time and I'm going to give it a shot, but they've talked about it so much that now you can no longer enjoy it at all. Uh,
yeah.
this happened to me with the TV show Buffy. I had someone, which
Oh.
I mean, it hits all the spots that I should like. This person was right. I should have liked it. But she talked about it. She was so obsessed about it and talked about it so much that when I watched it, it couldn't live up. And I was like, nope, not into it.
Too bad. It's a good
Yeah.
show.
I
I
think
mean,
there's
I
also
watched all of it. I watched all of it. I
yeah,
just didn't love it as much as she loved it.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. It's like there's this point where it's just too much. Like I and I don't know what this is. I don't know if there's a word for it where it's like, no, I want to come to this thing on my own. Like I want to find it on my own. So the more you tell me about it, then I feel like I have less ownership of it if I come to love it. Because then I'm indebted to you, maybe. I don't know. Maybe that's just the hipster in me that wants to like, no, I found it first. But I think a lot of us feel that in some
Oh,
ways.
for
Like we
sure.
want we want it to be ours, not just, oh, I only know this because of you.
I did
Yeah.
not get on the Harry Potter bus until book 4 was released. And then it was just the right, gentle person that suggested I should try it out. And I did. And of course, I loved it. But yeah, I mean, I avidly did not want anything to do with it because everybody was talking about it. But that's silly because it's brought me a lot of joy.
Yeah.
Like,
But yeah, I don't know what it is that makes us contrarian. But I think there is something in the way people approach us. So yeah, someone being pushy versus someone who's gentle, it does make a difference.
There's something to do with spoilers as well, because like if
Mm.
you discover something and you don't know anything about it, you get to have it all imprint on you freshly. Whereas if someone is telling you something, oh, this is this, and you're gonna love this, and da 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 da, then it's like you're expecting to meet those checkpoints along the way.
Hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of ways where like entertainment now can just feel like work. Like how many times have you said, "Oh, I'll put it on the list," and like you may really want to actually watch that thing, but it's like, I got so many things to watch, and this feels almost like homework, even though I know it's good. So I'm just gonna rewatch this other show instead, or watch stupid stuff on YouTube.
I was going to say
Uh,
the same thing. How am I going to rewatch all my shows I've already watched if I'm having to watch this new content?
yeah, because there's just too much now, and I think that's like every person in your life is like, oh, have you watched this? Have you watched that? It just so sometimes there's this knee jerk like, no, I'm not going to because I don't have time, or it's like I've missed the conversation around this show, right? Like I didn't watch Succession, and I watched a couple episodes like a month ago. I was like, well, everybody's kind of done talking about this though, so why should I bother? So it's again, there's just always more, and that makes it less exciting. Now, I think I heard a little bit in here, but so where do you see some overlaps between like the worst Christian evangelism and the worst pop culture evangelism? Or where do you see like big differences?
Um, well, it's the pushing of it, I think, first of all, because like pushy, you're gonna love this comedian, and pushy,
You're gonna love this
you're gonna
Jesus.
love this Jesus, are are kind of one and the same. And then I think
Hmm.
also like what Ronnie had said about talking about specific things, and then you feel like you have to have a checklist for it. So it feels like so much of evangelism is condensed into easily rememberable, which I'm sure is a word, things like the 5 steps to salvation. um, and you say that, and so these are these checks that you have to hit.
There's also something about when someone recommends something to you that they should already know you wouldn't like. And for me, that's like, I feel like any evangelism for me, because I've grown up in the church for so long, that you can say whatever you want to me and it will not be new information. Um, and like when if someone like is talking to me about a show, oh, there's this great show, you should watch it, and it mentions like lawyers and any sort of like legal battle, you have never met me. I'm not interested. I do not want to watch that.
Yeah.
So
Yep. Yeah, you got to know your audience, and that's sometimes the approach with Christian evangelism is like, well, it's all the same, right? We just give the same speech to everybody, the same things to memorize for everybody, and it works for everybody, but like it doesn't. And if you don't connect with people and know, what their experience is or what they need or what matters to them, it's not going to work the same. And I think people are much more aware of that now, but there's definitely, I think for a long time and probably still in certain areas, the idea of like, no, it's just one size fits all. Everybody should enjoy this. Everybody should believe this. Um, I mean, ways that it's different. There are, I suppose, the stakes aren't quite as high with pop culture stuff. Although sometimes it feels like it. Like if you don't, this show will change your life. If you don't watch this, you're just not experiencing all the joy you can. Um,
and that
and
actually might be a good point, Chris, because if someone said to me, this show will change your life and you're not experiencing all the joy you could because you're not watching it, immediately in the do not watch pile.
yeah,
Like, goodbye.
and also there's not like new seasons of the Bible coming out all the time, so I guess there's not like a whole lot of additional content. I guess there's like, oh, have you read this book or have you read this thing by this guy? So there is, I guess, in that way, new content, but in some ways, the basic Christian message isn't too different all the time. Yeah, I think with a lot of this, it comes down to like, what is the motivation? Like, what is motivating the person who's sharing, for the evangelist, and then what are they trying to instill in you? The ones that I thought of the most are guilt and fear and joy. With either Christian evangelism or pop culture evangelism, what do you see as the most common?
I think for pop culture, it's joy because you really like something and you want someone else to like it, sometimes for your own personal reason, because you're like, I want to talk to someone about this. I'd actually be more inclined to watch something if someone actually told me outright that's why they wanted me to watch it.
Mhm.
But it's interesting you say that the difference because maybe I'm skipping ahead, but the difference in the way that me and Anna Jane talk to people about K-pop is so stark in the way we do it because I'm not mentioning it to anybody ever. And Anna Jane like has banners and PowerPoints and like a foghorn that shouts out the BTS members' names,
Yeah,
like
basically.
face tattoos.
You're not far off.
I am who I am, guys.
Yeah. But both of those are coming from a place of joy. Ronnie, your joy is just a little more subtle, I would say. But
Right.
it's still the same base motivation. Like this has brought me joy, and I want to share it, and sometimes it's like I'm gonna share it no matter what, but it's not coming from really anything else. Um, I do feel like sometimes there's a little bit of guilt with pop culture stuff, especially when you're talking about like, serious dramas or, a documentary that's about something important. There, and maybe I feel this more. I mean, I've proclaimed myself the pop culture pastor, right? So I feel like, well, I need to know this. I need to watch this. I got to keep up with the conversation. Nobody actually cares other than me. And yet I just, sometimes feel guilty, like, oh, I didn't watch any of these Oscar movies. I'm like, well, it's okay. Like, I can let that go.
Chris, did you ever watch Portlandia?
A little bit. I
I'm
kind
not
of lost
suggesting it
interest.
right now
Okay,
that you watch it.
okay.
The moment has passed, to be honest.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
there's a sketch that they did where like two intellectuals are in a coffee shop, and one of them's like, "Oh, hey, did you read this thing?" And the other person's, "Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Did you read this?" And then they start running down the street trying to find anything that the other person hasn't read yet that they have, and they're like, "Did you read? Did you read?" That's kind of the situation you're in. You have to make sure you've read everything.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel that a little bit, but it's self-imposed, Whereas with the Christian evangelism, there's a lot of guilt, and it is not always self-imposed, right? That people who are in leadership, or especially when you're younger, people that are older than you are kind of making you feel guilty if you're not doing it enough, if you're not evangelizing your friends and bringing them to church, and so you're coercing people into sharing a coercive message, and the results don't really work out too well, because if it's not coming from a place of joy, then that's not what's going to come across. If it's coming from a place of guilt, all you're going to be able to give is more guilt. And same with fear, especially if you're in that turn or burn kind of message, which again is not good news. So let's just stop calling it that. If you're using fear is a motivator, but not for long, and not in a healthy way. I think the ideal in both in pop culture and from a faith perspective is that it is coming from a place of joy and love, and it just kind of overflows. Like, you talk about it because you want to talk about it. Saying this is going to save your life, okay, that's a bit much. That can be a bit off-putting, but like, if it's this made a difference for me, I mean, because there are shows and there are bands that I would say like this really has, really helped me or changed my life in some way. Right, that's more personal. It's more this did this for me. I don't know what it'll do for you. I'm not expecting it to do anything for you. I'm not trying to force you, but this is my experience. So it's more like witnessing. Right? It's like giving your pop culture testimony. That can be coercive, but it speaks more than just, here, let me tell you these facts about God that you need to memorize because I figured it out. So we've already talked about this issue of, there's some people you're going to trust when they recommend pop culture or something religious, and there's some people you're probably not going to. So why does the messenger matter as much, if not more, than the message, even if it just comes down to a show they're talking about?
Have you ever gone somewhere and seen like a bunch of really dumb slogans that are supposed to be funny? And you're like, why would anyone in their right mind hang that up in their house or think it's funny? And then someone else walks by and is like, oh my God, that's why.
Mm-hmm.
Because that person really thinks that that's funny and enjoyable. And they might recommend something to you, and then that you're presented with that garbage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like, okay, I'm just noting you're not necessarily a trustworthy person when it comes to recommendations. And I found, like, with pop culture, there are people who just have bad taste, so like they like things that are kind of terrible. And then there are people that have, I would just say, no taste, so they just like everything. So like they'll like a really good, serious, award-winning drama, and then they'll like something that's just, garbage. And so I was like, okay, I don't think you're just discerning at all, because if everything's good, then that's kind of meaningless. And so that's why it's important to complain about things a lot, so that people know that when you say it's good, it's really good.
You know what? Hold on, let me take notes.
I'll
Well,
straighten you out, Ronnie. Don't worry.
and it's time. Like, very few people that I have just met, if they recommend something to me, I'm not going to take it super seriously. But like, we'll take our favorite librarian, Dara Tinius. If she tells me to read a book, I absolutely read it right away. If she tells me to watch a show, I watch the show right away, because she knows me, for one. We have a history together, and I have seen the things that she likes and doesn't like, and I have seen her talk about them, and I like it. And so because of how she acts about this show or this band or this book or whatever, then I am going to do it, because she acts the way I would want. She acts in a way that draws my attention to what she's saying.
Yeah, it's like there's something attractive to it, draws you in. And I think that should be the same motivation for Christian evangelism as well. That like, and it's not even that we're like telling people, hey, you need to believe this or read this. It's just it comes across and how we are, and there's something attractive to the way that we live or the way that we talk, and it makes a difference. That's not as common as it should be, but that is the hope.
Even Jesus, right? He didn't start off evangelizing. He started off oftentimes talking with the person first, recognizing a need, and providing them with that need.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes not even with, now follow me and have eternal life.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus invested time in people, and it was because of that people were drawn to him. And I think it's similar in pop culture, that you see how people invest their time and what their tastes are, and like the time they invest in knowing you, that matters when they give a recommendation.
Mm-hmm. One of Jesus' first questions in one of the Gospels is like, "What are you looking for?" And he'll ask people, "What do you want?" And so he was not pushy about who he was, but like he said, he was trying to connect with people and go from there. And that's what speaks to people. Well, to use another Bible word, has there ever been a time with pop culture that you've had to repent, where you're like, oh, this is going to be garbage, or someone was telling you over and over, and you finally gave in and watched it, you're like, oh, I was wrong. I could have been enjoying this a lot sooner. Anything come to mind?
I mean, I'm sure there is one or two things. I just can't think of anything right now.
I have a friend that also didn't hop on the Harry Potter bandwagon because it was a bandwagon. And she feels like she missed out on so much good, like pop culture meme reference years because she waited so long. So that's not my personal story, but same as Anna Jane's.
Mm-hmm. And I was kind of the same with Harry Potter too. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it continues to be divisive for various reasons. Golden Girls was one that for a long time I was like, oh, people just say they like this show to be ironic just because it's an old show and it's not good. And then we started watching it a couple of years ago. And I was like, oh, this is actually like way ahead of its time. Like, it's definitely from the 80s, but they're we're talking about things in a very surprising way for their time, and it like actually is funny. And so that was one. Anna Jane can take some credit for getting me.
Let me be clear on something. When he says we watched it a couple of years ago, I told him he needed to watch it, and we watched it together. I have loved it since I was like 8.
This is that hipster thing happening where she knew about it
I
first.
just need the people of the pop culture pastor world to know I liked it, and now he likes it.
Yes.
It's important.
I mean, it existed before you were watching television.
This is true.
So I'm going to go ahead and say that you probably didn't get in the first wave.
I don't know, little Anna Jane. So, sometimes we have to like have the humility to say, okay, maybe I'm wrong about this. And sometimes like we were right to be skeptical, and just because something is popular and everybody's on that bandwagon doesn't mean it's good. but you want to check it out sometimes. Well, speaking of things that are very popular, but maybe not everyone is aware of, we've been talking about pop culture evangelism in the broad sense, but as we've kind of hinted at, we want to talk about the thing that has become our most recent pop culture obsession, at least for Anna Jane and I. And so now I am becoming the K-pop culture pastor. I want you to understand the good news that I received and I hand on to you as first importance about BTS and K-pop.
Hey, yo, ladies and gentlemen, 준비가 됐다면 부르게, yeah. 자, 녀석들과는 다르게, 내 스타일로, 내 스타일로.
And Roni, the reason that you're on this episode is you were our pop culture evangelist, our godmother in the world of K-pop. So you tell us about your journey into getting into K-pop and BTS specifically, and we can all share a little bit of this is just as an example, the process of coming to love something and coming to share that thing that we love.
Sure. I was pandemic and we were all sitting at home alone. And I actually found an article just scrolling when I was supposed to be working. And I don't think I normally would have clicked on the article. It was a Rolling Stone article, and the title was something like BTS shows us the future that we were promised that we never got. And I was like, oh, and I kind of vaguely knew who BTS was. Also, I was already watching K-dramas and I lived in Asia for 3 years. So I was open a little, I feel like maybe I was a little bit more open to Asian culture than some people that I've talked to who say some very terrible things about it. So I clicked on the article and it was compelling. And I have found the article since then, and it is a great article.
We'll share it in the show notes. If I can
Okay, I'll try to find it. It took me a while to find it years later, but I'll try to find it for you. And so I read the article, and it was saying that BTS's specific brand of gender nonconformity, particularly in a very patriarchal society, which is Korea, was compelling. And the article was that wasn't the only thing they were arguing, but the article was kind of arguing that that's kind of the future that we were headed toward. And then Trump was elected. So, and I don't even know if they mentioned Trump, but this was the era that I was in. So that's how I interpreted it. And so then they mentioned some songs in there, and I was like, oh, I'll go through and I'll find one of these videos. And so I clicked open a video. I think it was Dynamite, maybe, which actually is funny because it's not indicative of their usual style.
It's in
but
English.
It's in English, first of all, and it's also very colorful. I mean, all their stuff's really colorful, but they didn't write it, so that's different for them. So there's some other things, but I enjoyed it a lot, and I found a lot of I found them compelling. And so then I started clicking on other things, and then I went down a rabbit hole, and then I didn't tell anyone about it because no one would listen, and everyone would look at me weird when I would tell them about it and say
what will
derisive
people think when
things.
they hear that I'm a BTS freak?
Yeah, but man, people say some really terrible things about people from other cultures. So
I've heard that.
I really was hesitant to even share with you guys. And when Anna Jane was over, I'm going to overlap a little bit on hers, but when she was at my house, curious about BTS, I kept trying to pull it back from her because I didn't want her to feel like I was pushing something on her. So I remember we were watching an interview and I stopped the interview because I was like, oh, she's probably not enjoying this. And she goes, hey, I was watching that. So yeah, so mine all started with an article in Rolling Stone. That makes me sound smarter also, so that's good.
Yeah. Very, very cultured. Yeah, I mean, I was the same where it was like, oh, I knew of them. And I think there was a little bit of the bandwagon thing of it's the biggest band in the world. Some of their videos have billions of views. Well, then I'm behind, I've already missed this boat. And also well, if it's that popular, maybe it's just not that good. But there's always some openness, right? There's not that initial, I don't know, tilling the soil. I'm just going to Christian evangelistic sort of metaphors here. If you're completely not open to something like K-pop, you're probably not going to be into it. But I try and know what's going on in the music world and in various genres. And I've mentioned plenty of times on this show, I'm not ashamed of my love of, like teen girl pop. And so it's, it's not too far outside of my wheelhouse. And so, I don't know if, Ronnie, you had conversations with Anna Jane about it a little before. I think Anna Jane had told me, like, hey, Ronnie says we should get into K-pop. And then you just made us a playlist, and we just checked it out, and was like, okay, well, this is my life now.
Sorry.
Well, I several years ago, I maybe it was 2021, that Ronnie and I were able to meet up for lunch, right? And you tried to play me.
Yeah, I got weird on you.
But I don't totally remember like thinking, wow, this is weird. I just remember just not like it just didn't hit the way it needed
Right,
to
of
hit at
course.
the time.
You were having a weird weekend anyway at that time.
So true.
Yeah.
But
So it didn't take.
No.
It took a couple years later.
It didn't take,
It
but
was
then
rocky soil.
I knew I was going to get to come and visit Ronnie in Tacoma, and we had been talking about Taylor Swift and we've been talking about BTS, and so I just said, okay, you make us a playlist of K-pop songs, so not just BTS, K-pop, some K-pop songs, and then we'll make you kind of some deep cuts Taylor Swift songs that you can enjoy. And so she sends it, and it's like 3.5 hours long. Your list was, Ronnie. It was so long.
I saw your list after I sent mine, and I was like, oh, this is what they wanted. They wanted 20 songs.
I edit my playlist pretty carefully.
But
it's okay if
like,
others don't.
But it was great because it just kind of turned it on, and I listened to it several times. And anytime there was a song that I really liked, I would add it to like my own K-pop list. And as I was doing that, I just noticed that it was kind of BTS heavy on the songs that I liked. So then I kind of just focused in a little more on BTS. And then I went to see Roni. And she was a fount of knowledge on all of it. And I had a ton of questions, and she had like some cool books and some pictures and stuff I could look at. And she was playing the interviews, and I was trying to switch my brain to recognize their faces and to be able to know their names. And I just, she created a monster. And I don't even think that was your intention, Ronnie, but like
Honestly, it surprised me so much. Like when you were sitting on my couch, okay, I have this box set that they did like their whole career box set, and it has all these booklets with all these photos inside that I haven't even looked through. And I've owned it for like 2 years. And Anna Jane sat there and looked at every photo and tried to guess who each member was in every photo. And in my head, I was like, what is happening?
There are 7 of them if people aren't aware. So that's, it is a big ask just to learn the names of the band members.
Also, I mean, when you aren't around Asian people all the time, it is harder to tell them apart at first. And I've had people say, oh, I feel racist because I feel like some of them look alike. And it's like, well, you're not used to looking at these faces. And also, they're all being styled. So they do have a similar look to them as well. So that's okay.
So, as we've mentioned, both of us have gotten into it, and I've like tried to, expand and get into multiple K-pop bands. I also really like the band New Jeans, which is a girl group that's currently active. BTS isn't putting out music right at the moment. I think we both recognize that Anna Jane is taking the deepest dive on this. So, like,
100%.
What would you say really is the biggest thing that makes you love them, and why you want to evangelize the BTS gospel so much?
So these 7 guys, okay, are so genuinely good that I can't help but fall in love with them. And I mean, like, they've been in front of the camera for 10 years. They've done reality shows. They've had documentaries done. They've been interviewed. They do all of these things. And I have tried to find bad things about them. And I just really can't. I mean, there's little tiny things, but we're all human, okay? And that speaks volumes to me, of who they are, who their character. And as I've watched more videos and interviews and those kinds of things, I recognize their work ethic, and I have a deep respect for the work ethic that they have, and their collective view of how they are as a group. Like, they definitely have this mentality of when one of us succeeds, all of us succeed. So when they're doing their solo projects, they help each other with it. And like RM and Suga will write or produce a song for V or Jimin. And I think that takes a certain level of humility. And also it tells me that they love each other. And in a culture that's so patriarchal, that they're so affectionate with one another, and they're so gracious to one another, and they make fun of each other, but they cry together, and I just can't say, like, the love they have, and you can see it and you can feel it, and it just has brought me so much joy to be introduced to something so wonderful and so delightful and so entertaining. Like, it is literally, I have laughed and cried so many times on my BTS journey, which only started in February,
Yes.
to be clear. Okay.
Feels like it's been a lifetime.
I'll chime in and say that, we don't, whenever we're talking about public people, we don't know who they really are ever. Because, they have cameras on them. But it is true that there seems to be a genuine support between them. And, you get sucked into like music videos and interviews. They're so funny. They're very funny together. And that for me is a big draw, because it's like they're so
They don't
smart and
Yeah, they
funny.
don't take themselves too seriously, even though they
Yeah.
also work hard and
Well, they take
Yeah.
their work seriously, but they don't take themselves seriously.
Yes. Yeah,
And
yeah,
that
yeah.
is chef's kiss.
Yeah. And it is, I mean, again, saying that we don't know everything that's in someone's mind, but it's interesting to see a group of men, particularly, no offense, Chris, as you know, being supportive of each other without having that element of toxic masculinity. And I have heard people say that that's because, like, they put that reflection onto Korea and say, oh, Korean men are not this way. And I don't know every Korean man. However, I do work with a lot of people from all over the world, actually, in my job. And Korea is a patriarchal society. It's not some special utopia where men are not afraid to be affectionate with each other and all these kinds of things are happen. It does seem like BTS is one of those instances where, sometimes a group of people, and you may have experienced this in your life, where you have a group of people for a period of time that get together and you're like, this is such, like, maybe study abroad, your friends and study abroad all mesh together and you had a chemistry maybe, but they seem to have found that with each other. And it is very, I feel like when you watch it as someone who lives in the world with human men, and then you watch it, there's an element of like, oh, this is maybe how men are supposed to react to each other
yeah.
instead of the way that they actually do. And so there's a feeling of relief when you watch it, even though it's not real life outside of this group.
Yeah. Well, and like, we're not going to go through all their history and stuff. Talk to Anna Jane. She's done a 2-hour PowerPoint presentation on them, which I do have recorded. So, if I get enough likes, maybe we can drop that in the feed. But, like, just, looking at their
Please
journey. Subscribers only. I don't have a subscription plan, but subscribers.
You're
can get
going
that.
to lose viewers.
But, in their journey, especially early on when their label had a little more control over them and the image they presented was very much that typical masculine, and they came to this point where like, no, we're not doing that. And then they all started having, pastel colored hair and colorful outfits, and they're just affectionate with each other. It's made a cultural shift, it sounds like, in some ways. And it's just, you see the love and that draws people in. I think that's part of why they are so popular, is the joy comes across whatever kind of music they're doing. They have lots of different styles, I mean, K-pop as a genre is covering a lot of, different types of music, but the joy comes through no matter what they're doing, and I think that's why it connects with so many people.
I saw at one of their concerts they did just before they went on hiatus. There was a really old couple that was at the show, like probably in their 80s, and somebody interviewed them, like, why do you like BTS? And they said, it's so nice to see seven young men loving and supporting each other like
Mm.
this, which is just kind of what we're saying too. And it's so weird to like a group that's a music group and like them for that reason because I the music is great and they do write and produce and they're heavily involved in their own music, which is nice. But normally when you like a band, you don't care as much about what they're like outside of the group necessarily, except for you guys and Taylor Swift.
That gets tricky sometimes too.
But those old people, I mean, it's funny that they echo the same sentiment that we have about it, about how they love and support each other.
I think when the very first BTS video that Ronnie had me watch was the carpool karaoke that they did with James Corden. And I fell in love with them. And I had only just started listening to the music. I couldn't even have told you what a BTS song was. But them in the carpool karaoke was so precious and so special that it just immediately made me want to know more. It did because they're so cute.
Are you gonna cry? Right? I feel
She seemed like she was close earlier when she was
Oh my
when she was giving her testimony.
gosh. Why am I the way that I am?
We love you. Well, obviously we could talk more about BTS and K-pop for a long time. I hope you're at least interested in it. So I'll share in the show notes my BTS playlist, which is not 3 hours. It's a little more pared down than what Ronnie sent us.
Hey, hey, hey. That was a full K-pop playlist. That was not a BTS playlist.
This is true.
Don't you slander my
This is
name.
true.
Sorry. Well, I also have a general K-pop list that is not quite as long. So that's got some BTS and New Jeans and
The
plenty of other
Rose,
great
yeah.
K-pop bands that we love. So yeah, check it out. Also, checking out the music videos is great. For one, there's always good choreography. And if you watch on YouTube and you turn on captions, it'll translate the lyrics, which, obviously the language barrier can be a bit of a hurdle to get over. So that can help with that. But, it's interesting. And this is a move I've actually seen in general in music in recent years that language barriers aren't as big of a thing. Like there's a lot of Spanish language music that's becoming popular. And so some of these things, when we're seeing the joy or the love or even other emotions, it still comes across even if you don't actually understand the words that people are saying. I think that's one of the great things about music, and you can enjoy it no matter how much you understand everything that's being said. So, like I said, we're talking about BTS and K-pop because that's the thing that we're into, but there's so many things that we love in pop culture, and it is great to get to share that, not because we want to feel superior and make sure everybody likes the correct things, but just, well, sometimes it is that, okay. But at its best, it is this has brought me joy, and maybe it'll bring you joy too if you want to check it out. Which leads into our last segment we do together on this podcast, which is our pop culture consolations and desolations, where we talk about something in pop culture that's been life-giving and possibly something that is not life-giving, right? This is in every episode, and this is an evangelistic moment. So, Ronnie, what's something in pop culture that's been a consolation for you, something life-giving?
Mine is also K-pop related, I'm sorry. But
Okay.
a couple of weeks ago, I went to the K-pop concert Tomorrow by Together, which is one of my top K-pop groups of all time. And we were really close to the stage. We had a great time. And what's so cute is that when you go to a K-pop concert, first of all, contrary to people's beliefs about it, people of all ages are there. And so we were in line with people our age and some people older. But people will walk by you with with these bags and they're like, do you want a freebie? And you get given little like baggies with like photos of the members and candy and little handmade bracelets, kind of like the Taylor Swift thing. And so we got given freebies. Everybody's so nice to each other, and all that kind of stuff. So we just had a really good time at the TXT, also called Tomorrow by Together.
I am also a fan. Anna Jane always seems a little offended when I'm listening to a K-pop boy band that's not BTS. But yeah, TXT is great. They're
like
also on
them.
that.
I do. They're precious and they're very talented.
Yes. Anna Jane, what's a pop culture consolation for you?
Well,
this week?
can I do my consolation and desolation together?
Sure.
Because they're the same thing.
Interesting.
Okay. Bridgerton season 3. You guys, I loved it so much. I have been waiting for Colin and Penelope's story for years. And we finally got it, and they only did half of it. And then they made us wait an entire month before we could watch the second half of it. And that is both my consolation and my desolation. Because
And there's BTS in it.
they have a BTS song in the show. That is correct. So yes, I cannot wait for the second part of Bridgerton season 3.
Yeah. And speaking of pop culture evangelism, Anna Jane definitely made me watch all the key moments from the first half of the season right after she finished it.
Oh, don't you know I
So-
played that carriage scene for him? If
Well.
you know, you know.
Yeah. My consolation, non-K-pop related. I just finished the series Fallout, which is on Prime Video, based on a video game series that I played some and have generally had mixed feelings about. But I did enjoy the show. It's, actually part of a growing positive trend where they're taking video games and actually making good series out of them. There were points kind of in the middle of it where I was like, okay, what is the overall story here? Where is this all going? Because it's kind of following 3 different characters, which is not always my favorite thing, but it did kind of come together really well in the end. So, if you want a very violent, post-apocalyptic kind of show, Fallout is there for you. Well, I don't think either of us have any other desolations, at least that we can think of right now. But thanks for being on the show today, Roni and Anna Jane.
You're welcome.
Woo!
Woo!
Well done, good and faithful podcast guests.
Oh my God.
Well, now's the point in the show where we do get a little more serious. We've talked a lot about spreading the good news, whether it's about Jesus or about BTS or anything else in pop culture that we love. And if this podcast is something that you love, I hope that you will share it. And we talked about the problems with some manipulative and guilt and fear-based forms of encouraging evangelism. And that's not what this is. I mean, I hope that you are aware of the gift that you've been given and that it instills a desire that your heart overflows with joy from this podcast, and so you can't help but share on social media. So I'm not trying to guilt you, but I do want to encourage you to be like the sower and spread the seed of this podcast wherever you can so that this joy can abound more and more for everyone. Pop Culture Pastor is produced by me. Thanks again to Roni and Anna Jane for being on the show today. Our theme music is Be Thou My Vision from the 8-Bit Hymnal by Mr. Tyler Larson. Our show comes out every other Thursday on your preferred podcast platform. But you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Pop Culture Pastor for more content in the meantime. Next time, we're going to be talking about X-Men and inclusion as a special Pride Month episode, talking about why blue lives matter. But for now, you are dismissed. Go in peace.